Okay, we are live. I give people just a minute to get ready. Give people a minute to get on. A little bit of a difference. I was talking to Coach Flowers about this earlier, but have this huge size difference between a lot of the people on the show. It's not the problem for this, luckily enough. We have 4 on right now. I'm going to give just a few more seconds before we officially get started. Go wait till 30 seconds. And okay. Hello, ladies and gentlemen of Vanderbilt, and welcome to Terrier Talk. This is episode 19, the season finale. More details on that later of Terrier Talk, and I am here with a very special guest, coach of many things. I'll talk about the official title in a second.
Yes.
Coach Flowers, pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me. It's
Yes.
been an honor.
Thank you. So, that big thing, the title of your job at Vanderbilt, what is it exactly?
All right, so to kind of start from the top and work my way down, I am the head performance coordinator. We are not a strength and conditioning program. We decided that name was too much of a pigeonhole. It didn't really focus on what I was personally. So I'm the head performance coordinator instead of strength and conditioning coach of the positive performance program, because we feel that we have to work both the mind, body, and the soul, where I felt like strength and conditioning was just on the physical aspect of it.
It's character development more than it is.
It really is. And so much of it is intermittent exercise when it comes to the actual program. I'm not naive enough to think these kids are going to be with me for the rest of their lives, but I want them to actually have some form of education as to what they're going to do when they leave me, when they go to college, when they go on and become parents and they're trying to carve out time to actually be healthy. So these are all things that I want them to carry on after they leave me. So that's why it's really a positive performance program. On top of that, I've been the offensive line coach for 4 years since I came in back in about 2015, I believe.
Yes.
I've been the offensive line coach. I've sort of moved my position up almost incrementally every year. This past year, I was the run game coordinator, to where the offense was – obviously you have an offensive coordinator. Right. Coach Hawthorne gave his 2 cents as far as a passing game, and I gave my 2 cents on the run game. My main job was to obviously coach the offensive line, but it was to look at their front 6, front 7, and figure what runs can we accomplish this year. And obviously, when you look at it, Drew Rios had an absolutely fantastic year, putting up 200 yards. Yes, 1,000 yards, which is, as an offensive line coach, it's great. Brennan had 1,000 yards last year. Rios has 1,000 yards this year. Puts up 200 plus against Edie White. So it's really just offering suggestions to our offensive coordinator to make sure that they have the right game plan, and then just kind of being in his ear for that. And then, of course, as the performance coordinator during the day, my daytime duties is to run the performance program.
Right. So something interesting about that difference between character development and the exact, strength and conditioning, it's something that I learned because back in 8th grade, my 8th grade year, back in 2015 when you came as a replacement as the world history coach, the world geography coach, world geography teacher. And your
208.
Yes. Your first priority, it almost felt like your first priority, not that learning the material wasn't important, it was important, but it was character development. It was making those kids, myself included, into the people that would be successful in, later on down the course. So I can see that as an extension to now.
Yes.
First of all, thank you both, Ross and Jonathan. Yes, he is the world's best world geography teacher. Thank you both for commenting on today so far, and thank you for watching. Another big, I guess, event of news going into this next year for football. Of course, that is the sport that you mainly coach outside of strength and conditioning, the performance program. There is a coaching change, a head coaching change. So is there any major changes in coaching philosophy or the exact coaching or philosophy that you are planning or the coaching staff is planning to go into this next year?
Well, I can mainly speak for myself. I'm secure enough in my coaching ability that my philosophy really doesn't change. I've adopted a lot of my style and a lot of my philosophy from Coach Matt Clark, the man who I was a GA under when he was the offensive line coach at Nichols. I was his grad assistant. Obviously, Coach Charlie Stubbs, who was the head coach over there, and then working with Coach Rebo as well. So when you're working with all of these top quality coaches, I mean, Coach Clark might be the smartest offensive mind I've known. So when you see how they do things, you take a lot of what they do, and then you also take a lot of, okay, that's not really my personality, but I can shift that a little bit to make it fit who I am. This past year, our main theme was lift up together. And that's something that I'm going to keep, mainly because that's who I am. As far as offensive line, we're big meats. That's a philosophy that's never going to change. Right. We lift up, we stay together, we work together, we take our pickle shots together, we do, we're just weird like that. But
it's a pack.
It's a pack, it's a group. Defensive line has Delta Lambda. I mean, the DBs have ball hawks. Everybody's got their own specific group. So as far as my philosophy, I won't change. Obviously, the style and what I'm coaching will change off the whims of the offensive coordinator and the head coach, mainly them being the indirect leaders and the strategic leaders of the group. But as far as me personally and how I relay that information, mainly as an educator, that really won't change, because it's all about how do I get this information across to these players? Do they understand? Are they able to teach it to somebody else? And so that philosophy won't change, mainly because it's been successful.
Right.
But what is being taught obviously will change, mainly because the shift in the paradigm shift between coaches.
Do you have any idea of exactly how that's going to change going into this next year?
I have an idea as far as the run game is concerned, which is great because our run game is very similar. Wherever you go, I mean, if you look at the NFL really only has 3 runs. Most people think it's shifty because somebody hits it inside, outside, this, that, and the other. It's really 3 runs. So as far as the main schemes and things like that, we're changing a few things, but the overall schemes, as far as the run game is concerned, isn't going to shift very much, mainly because it's almost universal.
Right.
I mean, zone is zone, power is power, buck sweep. It is what it is. The matchup issue that most people are going to see is how we utilize our athletes versus their athletes, which in any form of high school, it's
in any form of sporting competition.
really in high school, we were talking a little bit about it earlier when I was in college, it was a lot easier. But in as far as high school, it's just, can my guy beat your guy? Okay, then we're going to use this.
Yes.
And so much of that requires us to put in the work on Saturdays and Sundays. So,
I know I've seen it before with my own eyes. This coaching staff is one of the most hard-working in the entire state, even in the nation.
Yeah, man, we try. We put the work in. Definitely, it's one of those things. One of my coaches said it to me. He said, if it's important, you'll do it. And so if it's important to me as a coach to make sure that you all are successful, I said it to you, your group. I said it to the group after you. I say it to the kids in the performance program all the time. You're going to be successful whether you like it or not. My number one priority is your success. So teaching them that is, obviously, I'm going to put the work in, mainly because if it makes you successful, that's what we do it for.
Right. Then that makes you successful.
Yes, it does.
No,
it really does.
No, I'm not talking about that from like a job standpoint. I'm talking about from that's your goal, that's your priority. And if we succeed on that priority, then you succeed in your priority.
Right, exactly.
So, and that's important. I think Coach Lede, of course, the new coach, I've met him. I think this is going to be a very successful year. I think he's going to be great as a coach, and I can't wait to see how this unfolds into next year. So,
as well.
Is there anything else you want to talk about going into this? Anything else you want to say?
The summertime is going to be a great time for football. Coach Lede is going to be here. Obviously, we've been splitting time between us and Brother Martin. He's kind of been chomping at the bit to get here.
Waiting for June 1st, right?
He's waiting for it. But as far as the workouts, what we do on the field, the practices, things like that, it's going to be high intensity. So the football players are going to be worked, but they're also going to see how this new regime can make them better, and they'll also see a method. I don't want to say method to the madness because it's not madness, but in that scenario, that's basically what it is. But no, man, it's going to be a successful year. I've said this multiple times. I'm here to change lives. If I do my job correctly, the scoreboard will take care of itself.
Right.
I want to win, absolutely. But you win a game before you even step on the field. So if we do our jobs correctly, we'll be successful.
You win the game Saturday to Thursday, Saturday to Wednesday. You don't win the game Friday.
The scoreboard will not tell me if I'm successful or not. Not in this position that I'm currently in. Not with the way that I'm trying to change lives. The scoreboard will not dictate whether or not I'm successful. You 10, 15, 20 years from now will dictate if I was successful.
And I know myself, as well as a lot of my peers, you have affected our lives. You have changed our lives. The way we look at the world, the way that we see the world is different now than what it was going to 8th grade and 8th grade before we met you. So
I appreciate that.
Thank you for that. And thank you for being on.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right.
So, thank you to Coach Flowers. If you want to stay and watch, you can. If not, either way, it is okay. Yes, sir. So, there's a lot more to talk about outside of Coach Flowers. There is a huge season recap, a year in review for this year. That is the rest of this video, as well as a little bit of an award ceremony. Thank you, Coach Flowers. A little bit of an award ceremony. Of course, if you have any questions, this is live interaction is promoted, is wanted. So any questions regarding anything, any corrections you want to make, of course, just say it. So a lot to talk about regarding this year. It was a very big year for Vanderbilt, a very successful year for Vanderbilt in sports. And I want to just go through all of the highlights, both fall, winter, and spring, all three facets. I think I am able to cover every sport, a highlight from every sport in this. If I miss one, I apologize. But I think I'm covering everyone. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. The beginning of the year, we went into September with the fall season, and we started with the football team facing Thibodeau. This whole day, I'm not going to spend as long as I'm going to spend on this one game as I am going to with the rest of these games. Don't worry, we're not going to be here for an hour. But there's a lot to talk about with this first game hosting Thibodeau for the football team. The football team that day, people probably remember this day very specifically and not very fondly. This was the day, unfortunately, that a classmate of mine, Ben Leary, passed away. And that it set the tone for the entire day and for the entire game. Because the way that the defense played and the way the entire team played against Thibodeau, it almost felt like he was there helping us. He was there he was there protecting us. And it was almost magical watching this. It was magical helping us out. Not magically helping us out, not in fine intervention, but it was magical in the spectacle of it. In the game, there were 14 separate goal to go within the red zone, within the 10-yard line, situations for Thibodeau to score that they failed to score. And every single time, I was on the first floor of the press box for this game, doing the statistics, and I peered down to someone asking, how are they doing this? This is amazing. And they replied, it's Ben. And it was that was the theme of the game. And it was special, that entire game. And it's unfortunate how the game ended. It felt like we were not favored going into the game, despite beating Thibodeau last year. We're not favored going into the game. The tragic news at the beginning, I'm not going to say no one thought we were going to win, but it was not. We came in as somewhat of the underdog, and it was this story of hope. The story, we're up 10-0 early on in the game, and it was just a game against the clock. If we could hold that for the entire game, and it came up with a tragic ending. After an interception thrown right at the beginning of the fourth quarter, there's actually a theme through the football season. The beginning of the fourth quarter was not a good play for us. Large gains, touchdowns against H.L. Bourgeois would follow. That led to an overtime game against Central Catholic, against Assumption. Not good plays for us. An interception thrown in the game against Thibodeau. And it was just too much, too close, too bad a field position for the defense to be able to hold. They scored a touchdown. 10-7 for the entire fourth quarter. Get down 3 minutes left. You have third down. Assumption is getting into a situation where they may have to punt the ball away, may have to go for it on fourth down, give the ball up one last time, and we're going to be able to win this game. And we get a tragic 81-yard slant pass turned into a touchdown that, of course, led to Thibodeau winning that game. It was a tragic end to the game, and it didn't set the tone for the season. It wasn't a great season for the football team record-wise, but it was a very memorable beginning to the season. Of course, the next week against HL Bourgeois, so many different things happened, led to an overtime victory, 13-7. Only the second overtime game in my time at Vanderbilt, the first in 3 years. There against HL Bourgeois, we had the 131 straight scoreless game minutes from the second half of the South Terrebonne game, which was a memorable game in itself. That was a game against the clock, our only comeback victory of the season, I think. Then leading it to a scoreless win against South Lafourche, 27-0, and then 34-0, I think, against Ellender the next week. We go into the Central Catholic game, 131 minutes straight without giving up a single point. That is an amazing statistic for any defense in high school and college, whatever. Our defense was phenomenal all season, and it is just an exemplary showing of that. Now, we go into the Central Catholic game. It was an upset. They ended up winning, and that was not a good point, of course, at all for our season. Don't want to talk too much about that. It was a good game from an entertainment perspective, but it was not the game that we really want to talk about. The Assumption game the next week, district on the line. I have Assumption is a team that I've never really seen available, like in football, basketball, baseball. Not that we haven't beaten Assumption in those sports specifically at any point, but I've never watched it with my own eyes. And we were this close. In that Assumption game, one of the best games of the year. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. The Assumption team down 14-0 at half. Our defense held strong. We score once on a fake punt. We score a second time on a fade pass. Jacoria, our holder, gets hurt, and we have to send in our backup holder. The PAT gets messed up, and we end up losing the game 14-13 in tragic fashion. It was an amazing game from an entertainment perspective, from a spectator perspective. That's the game of football. That's the story that you want to see in a game of football. That's why you watch the game. But it was tragic. It was not the game that we wanted. It was not how, of course, it was not how we wanted the game to end. Then the season didn't exactly end the best way in bad losses against Edie White and De La Salle to finish off the season. That was football. Now we had much better fall results for the other two big fall sports, cross country and volleyball. Volleyball is, of course, just a girls' sport. Volleyball went on to win the state championship for a second year in a row, defeating Edie White in the finals. I watched us play Edie White, not in the finals, but when we played them just in the regular season. It was a great game. I think we swept them 3-0 in that game, 3-0. Go on to beat them again in the finals. On paper, it has to be the single biggest version of the Holy War this season. We saw some big ones, and of course, we'll talk about one a little bit later on, again, in the baseball season. But this one was important. This one was for the state championship. All of that rivalry sets the tone for the year, one of the first versions of the game going throughout the year. And we won. And that's important. It's important for bragging rights, and obviously it's important for that state championship. Back-to-back state championships for the volleyball team, of course. Congratulations for them. The cross-country team had a very good season. The boys, a young boys cross-country team, had, with only one senior, placed 7th in state. A very strong showing, a surprisingly strong showing for the cross-country team. And then maybe more notably so, the girls team won the cross-country season. After last year, with a little bit of a tragic ending to the season, a very strong season, but a little bit of a tragic ending, the girls team, I think someone fell out, I don't know exactly who, didn't finish where they wanted to going into the end of the season at state. They avenged that in some of the worst conditions of the year. It was up north. I want to say it was in Natchitoches. Correct me if I'm wrong. It was muddy. It was muggy. It was awful. I think it was cold. But we prevailed. We won. And the girls won the state championship, which is, of course, huge. Vengeance for the previous year. And big congratulations, of course, to them. I actually talked to Coach Malone, of course, the coach of the cross-country team, the day after. And to quote him, he said, it was, in his words, the worst, best day of my life. very funny quote from Coach Malone, and obviously a great season for him. And I, of course, hope the team the best of luck going into the next season. Hopefully they can defend that championship. Swimming also was in the fall. Nothing, I don't remember exactly much from the swimming season, but congratulations to everything that they did. They had a strong season, and I hope the best for them going into next season. Those were the 4 fall sports. Now we're going to move into the winter sports. The winter sports have, again, 4 sports, but instead of the fall, where you have football, volleyball, and then cross country is also important, swing, you have 2 sports and 2 genders for each sport, boys and girls, of course. And all 4 are equally, are all very big sports and all equally as big. That being boys basketball, boys soccer, girls basketball, and girls soccer. So a little bit of a different dynamic. Of course, this is where Terrier Talk started, right in the middle of this season at the beginning of January this year. So this recap is going to be a little bit less prominent because I've already talked about a lot of these things. Boys basketball didn't have a great season this year. The record didn't really show that. No, it did show that, excuse me. Not a great record, around 35% win percentage. I think one of the only 2 teams this year, along with boys football, to have a below 500 win percentage at the end of the year. But it was a little bit worse than boys football. Boys football only going 5-6. Boys basketball, not a lot of wins, only 1 district win, but man, was that a district win. The boys, they beat South Terrebonne at home in overtime by 1 point. The best the crowd had ever been all season. It was a raucous crowd. It was a great crowd, and it led us to our best victory and our biggest, closest victory of the season. Not a lot, not that many more highlights from the season. Hosted the first holiday shootout. Holiday, I think it was the holiday shootout. That was the name of it. In December, actually had a pretty good showing there, placing runner-up, placing second there. We had a Game of the Year candidate, and I'll talk about that later with the awards ceremony. The awards that I'll talk about at the end of the show against South Lafourche. That story was amazing because South Lafourche. So here. Let me paint the picture. I was able to go to this game. Let me paint the picture of how the South Lafourche game went. South Lafourche every year when they play some basketball and football and any sport, but especially basketball, it doesn't matter where the game is. South Lafourche has a crazy crowd, especially at home, especially in cutoff for South Lafourche. It's raucous. It's crazy. They're obnoxious. It's a good type of obnoxious, but it's obnoxious. And South Lafourche, it is a crazy crowd. But this year, when we traveled, they, of course, had a big crowd. But we, with that momentum, our last game was the South Terrebonne game. With that momentum, went into South Lafourche with a huge crowd of our own. We came out to an early lead in the first and second quarters. We ended up trailing at halftime just by 3 points. We had to fend off, try to catch up to them. We stayed around that 3-point marker for the majority of the game. Going into the final minutes, trying to get a big victory against South Lafourche. You want to talk about bragging rights? You want to talk about trying to beat Edie White in any sport? South Lafourche is very much like that as well. Beating South Lafourche in basketball is huge. And we were so close. Going into that game, we were down, I think it was 49-52. Or maybe it was 51-54. We're down 3 with 50 seconds left. 3 is taken. Our best shot to tie up the game, to knot up the game at the end of the game. And it's off the back of the rim. South Lafourche rebounds. South Lafourche goes on to win the game. I think it was by 4-6. Another tragic end to a big boy sport rivalry game. And it was a great game. It was an entertaining game, but it was, of course, a tragic game. Girls basketball. Not much more to say about boys basketball. Not a great finish to the season. Lost in the first round of the playoffs. Girls basketball had some highlights. So I talked about earlier on in this video about boys football and the defensive showing throughout the season, the 131 straight scoreless minutes throughout 4 different games. The rigor, the toughness of that team, because the theme of the year for this football team, and it will extend into the entire year for all of the sports, was physicality, it was toughness, it was rigor, it was the will to win. And this girls basketball team showed that as much as anyone else this year. 8 straight wins at one point this year, including partially in the district. We weren't quite able to win the district. We had a very strong district this year. You're welcome, men, and thank you for commenting today. Thank you for that. We had 8 straight wins. A very memorable defensive showing. I think at one point, giving up less than 35 points per game in basketball is very impressive. And we played with that physicality every single day, every single game. We didn't have a very strong finish in district, but we finished better than maybe people were expecting us to, and that's still very good considering just how strong our district was. I want to say we finished 3rd or 4th. Middle of the road in a very strong district, nothing to be ashamed of there. And no one specific game I recall as being, the game of the year for the girls basketball team. There were a few good ones. A close loss to Assumption with a star-making performance from their best player. Close loss to Terrebonne in our own tournament. We placed 3rd in our girls basketball at the Jack Becker Classic. Outside of that, the close loss in the second round, of the girls basketball state championship against Turlings. I think it was 47-43. A couple of overtime victories. Brittany Terrier almost had a triple-double. Brittany Terrier was probably the player of the year for girls basketball. Had a great season. Same thing in volleyball for Brittany. Brittany defined this toughness a lot in both sports and in the year in general. So great season for the girls basketball team. And, of course, I wish them the best of luck going into next year. Boys soccer had a few very memorable games, and an interesting, memorable season. So I was thinking about the boys basketball team a few days ago in an interesting comparison. For people who watch the NFL, here's an interesting analogy. So the Philadelphia Eagles, this is a bit of a tangent, so I apologize, but the Philadelphia Eagles went into the 2017-2018 season. They were the one seed going to the playoffs. No one thought they were going to win because of whatever was going to happen. Obviously, in that case, it was Carson Wentz's injury. They were the underdogs, and they just kept winning, and they went on to win the championship game. So in the next year, they're a low seed, and they're underdogs, and they have to face this really high seed, and no one expects them to win. They don't quite create the magic of the year previous, the championship season of the year previous, but they still have that one magical game. For the Philadelphia Eagles, that was the Chicago Bears. Of course, that famous double hit off of the crossbar and the field goal post, missed field goal, partially blocked field goal to win the game. That was the Philadelphia Eagles, of course, coming up short against New Orleans Saints the week after. For Vanderbilt, this was the boys soccer team these last 2 years. The 2017-2018 season, we were a 6th seed. We were underdogs. We had to face these very high seeds, including the number 1 seed Edie White Cardinals, beating them in penalty kicks to win the game, to win the championship in the state championship game in penalty kicks. In the Holy War, an amazing game and an amazing finish to that postseason and that season in general. This year, we were the 9th seed. We couldn't quite create that same magic. We came up short against Loyola Prep. We came up short against Edie White in the district championship game against Edie White. There, we lost 1-0 in a crazy game. That game that we'll probably talk about for months to come. I talked about that in one of the first episodes of this series. But we had that one magical game, that one game that everyone's going to look back at and remember for years. And, of course, that was the game against St. Louis. Amazing performance from Nick and Marley, an amazing performance from our defense, a score in the 66th minute, and it was just a crazy game. We had the perfect game plan, we had the perfect strategy, and we executed it perfectly, and we beat the number 1 overall seed. They were a beatable team. We showed that they were a beatable team, and we got the win. Even if we came up short in the end, it was still a great season, an amazing postseason, and a very impressive year for that boys soccer team. They way overachieved going into that last season. Very young team, but they did everything they could. They had that willpower, that rigor, that toughness. That was almost the theme of this year. They showed that this year against St. Louis, against Evie White, against all of these great teams. And of course, I wish the best of luck to them going into next season, and hopefully with that experience. Because if you're young one year, the next year you're going to be experienced. They can take that experience and move on to the next level going into this next season. Finally, for the winter, we have the girls' soccer team, maybe the most nationally impressive team this year. So talented. They were nationally ranked. I talked about this a lot in the early weeks. They were 24th in the nation, 27th in the nation, 50th in the nation, 100th in the nation, whatever. One of the best schools, one of the best soccer teams in the entire nation, playing some of the best soccer teams in the entire nation, like St. Scholastica, who they came up short against, like Mount Carmel, who they had maybe the most exciting game of the year against, down 2-0 at halftime, coming back to draw the game 2-2 against one of the best teams in the state and in the nation. So dominance in 80% of their games, 90% of the games, rigor, toughness in the games that they had to struggle in. They go into the state championship and they lose 3-0 to Turnlings. And it's unfortunate to go back and think about, because this was a team that was dominant the year before. Dominant going into that state championship game. I think it was against ULAB. And they came up short in penalty kicks. This year, they were dominant all year. The number 1 overall seed. They go into the state championship game, and they come up short. This time, it was a little bit of a wider margin, but obviously the two teams were at least equal, and they come up short. And hopefully, this team can regroup. This team can look back at these past couple of years and finish the job. Complete the job that they completed freshman year. They've been in 3 straight state championship games. Let's make it a 4th. Let's win this one. Let's win this one next year. And let's come back and become a better team going into next year. That's it for the winter. Going into the spring, tennis had a great year. The boys had a good showing in state, had a good showing in region. Only a couple of losses all season, both against St. Thomas More in the regular season, so a great job to the boys for that. The girls had an amazingly impressive year all season, an undefeated regular season. I think the only team that can truly say they had an undefeated regular season this year was that girls' tennis team. One region, one district, went on to state to place 4th, had semifinals contenders. I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Obviously, great job to both the boys and the girls teams. Their main core is going to age up one last year, going to be seniors next year. So hopefully we can get an amazing season to finish off this great senior class for tennis for both boys and girls going into next year. Golf had a strong showing. A couple of key, very strong players. A couple of players made it to state. So great job to golf. Track, boys didn't have that many highlights throughout the season. Had a couple, though. The big one being placing 2nd in Parish. Terrebonne's a very strong team, and we even came up close to Terrebonne at some points in that meet. It was a great meet for them. A very strong showing for the boys in that meet. And not the best year for boys track, but still a very strong year for boys track this year. Girls track is, of course, the much more, I'm not going to say important, but the much more memorable year to talk about, because girls, there is no undefeated regular season in track because they're meets, and the closest you can come is finishing in first place in all of the meets going into district, regional, and state. But the thing is, that's what the girls did. I'm pretty sure they finished first in every single meet they ran into this year. Cherry relays, Tiger relays, Gator relays, you name it. Doesn't matter which stadium they went to, doesn't matter which city they went to, they went in, they won, and then they left. That includes parish, that includes district, that includes region. And they went into state, and they competed at a championship contending level. They placed 4th. They were only 13 points behind the lead, behind that state championship, and they had so many great performances. One girl, I don't remember who, I talked about it last week, placing silver in state in one event after getting an injury, a hurt quad in the first event. Great performance from the girls track team in state and all of the changes that happened in state that year. Great season for both the boys and the girls track teams this year. And of course, I hope them the best going into the offseason and the next season. Finally, softball and baseball. Softball had a few very memorable games. This is interesting. So the girls and boys, if you compare like the girls and boys equivalent of each sport going throughout the year, the girls tend to be better, tend to have better records than the boys. The girls won the state championship at volleyball. The girls cross country team won. Girls basketball did a little bit better than the boys basketball team. Girls soccer got a little bit farther than the boys soccer team. Girls track did a little bit better than the boys track team. The one exception is softball and baseball. So the girls softball team, didn't have a bad year. They had actually a very good year. Placed just above 500 in their final record. Caught fire near the end of the season, and had some memorable games along the way. It didn't end exactly how they wanted it to. Not a great finish against St. Thomas More, losing 12-0, of course. But it was still a very good season, a very strong season, with a couple of memorable games. Spring, of course, they were the sports that I was able to talk about in full from the beginning to the end. So I was able to talk about softball when it happened. Specifically, the two games that I want to talk about, the Thomas Jefferson and the Central Lafourche game. Thomas Jefferson, I talked about it a lot with Leah Martin a couple of weeks ago when she was on. Thomas Jefferson, they won against a very high-seeded team. Very high-seeded team, very high good team, and Thomas Jefferson won in extra innings. And then the Central Lafourche game came up as a loss, but fireworks, 13-12, amazing game there, very entertaining to watch. So two very good games for softball there, and just a very memorable season. Great job to them. I've said this a lot this video, but I wish them the best of luck, of course, going into next season. Finally, we have the baseball team. Baseball team had a lot of tournaments, and I talked about those tournaments all year. And it was when I started to gather this idea of the theme of the year: toughness, rigor, toughness, willpower, all of this, physicality, the ability to go up to these great teams, this Shaw, this Jesuit, the ULAB, these great teams in Baton Rouge and in New Orleans, and go up and compete, throw that first punch, and win those games. Show that Vanderbilt is a team that is worth being reckoned with. And Vanderbilt did that. This baseball team did that. We competed in tournaments. We did well in tournaments. We came close to beating some of these great teams in tournaments. And the big tournament, the finals of the season, the district championship game against Edie White, that district championship series, and that final tournament in the state championship. Of course, the district championship game, maybe the biggest highlight of the season, just not how good the game was, but how big the game was. Probably the second biggest holy war of the year outside of the volleyball state championship game, the baseball team being the only team in the regular season to come up and beat those Dirty Birds 14 miles down the road, and 27-0 became 27-1 that night. And an amazing performance, a blowout one even for the Terriers. And finally, going into that state tournament, we came up short against De La Salle the first game. We came up and beat them in an amazing extra innings game the second game, and then just rolled that momentum, used that momentum, it beat them in the third game. We came up short against ULAB in the quarterfinals, but we made it to the quarterfinals. We were the only team to get an upset in the first round, and we won. We had an amazing season. We achieved great things, had a great record to finish off, and had all of the momentum going for us into the end. That's what Vanderbilt is. Maybe we're not the biggest team. Maybe we're not the fastest team. Maybe we're not the strongest team. Maybe we're not the best team on paper. But the thing with Vanderbilt is that we are tougher than everyone else. We're going to go into that game, throw that first punch in any sport, and come out and do our best. And one last thing, I want to finish this season, not this series, this is going to come back, of course, in the fall, but this season of Terrier Talk with. and that is a little bit of an award ceremony. So I have 3 awards. I'm going to give honorable mentions and an award for each of these teams. I have nothing physical to give these people and these teams, but just a bit of a shout out to talk about them. Firstly, Team of the Year. 5 teams make very strong cases. 2 teams winning state championships and 3 teams just having very strong, dominant performances throughout the season. First, the honorable mentions. The girls tennis team and the girls track team both placing 4th in state due to very strong seasons. Had the quote-unquote undefeated seasons for track and the actual undefeated regular season for girls tennis. So both very strong there. Just very good overall dominant seasons for them. Cross country, girls cross country, had that great state championship victory. A very memorable season for them. It's a season they will go back and look back at fondly for years to come. And finally, the girls soccer team, despite being nationally ranked, came up short in the end in that state championship game. So, the winner, the volleyball team. The volleyball team, they were consistent. They were consistent all year. Won when they needed to, did everything they could when they needed to. Best team in the division, best team in the state, and they showed it at the end. And that's why they deserve this. That's what defines a team like that. They were consistent every single week. So congratulations to the volleyball team for winning the 2018-2019 Terrier Talk Team of the Year. Moving on to Game of the Year, I talk a lot about specific games and, an entertainment perspective and things like that. So I think it's fitting to give a Team of the Year award. A lot of honorable mentions here. 5, actually, to be exact. Softball against Thomas Jefferson. I talked about this a little bit earlier on, just a few minutes ago. Extra innings game the week before the state tournament. We showed that we could hang with these teams no matter what happened in the next week. An amazing game, and of course, a victory for the softball team. Baseball, the game 2 of the best of 3 series against De La Salle. We lost 9-4 the first game. We go into this game and we compete in extra innings. We take them to extra innings and we get the win. And I guess the biggest game of the year at that point, trying to stay alive, trying to get into the next round, and we were able to do it in a very memorable game. Multiple great performances, multiple shining performances in that game. And of course, congratulations for that victory. Girls soccer, they didn't have that many memorable games, mostly because they dominated 90% of their competition. But one was that draw against Mount Carmel. A little bit about that game. They were down 2-0 at the end of the game. And then they go on, at the end of the first half, they go on to score twice in that second half, show that rigor, show that toughness, show that grit, and go on to draw a game against one of the best teams in the state and the best teams in the nation. Football, I want to give a little bit of a spotlight again to the Assumption game. That game deserves an honorable mention to me. Not obviously, no one likes losing, but it was very entertaining from a spectator perspective. That's a football game. The story, we haven't beaten Assumption in years, in 3 years, at least since I've been here, trying to beat Assumption for the first time in a long time, and we were so close. One play. Because if that game goes to overtime, we win. Yes, we are Masters 026. Yes, we are. We're going to go in for football this year. And thank you for commenting and thank you for watching. We were so close. And we're going to come back next year. And Assumption, it was a great game. As Master said, we're going to come in next year, of course. And it was one of the best games of the year. And I think it deserves this honorable mention. Basketball. I don't think baseball, the games against South Lafourche were that memorable. Obviously wins, but not that memorable. The basketball game against South Lafourche, I talked about it earlier on. I think it deserves a mention here. But the winner for the Terrier Talk 2018-2019 Game of the Year is, drumroll, the boys soccer game against St. Louis. This deserves it. This has the most story going into it. This has a climactic ending. A great single game performance. Obviously, Nick Norley had an amazing year, as I'll talk about in a little bit. but that performance was stellar from Nick in this game. We won 1-0 against the number 1 overall seed. We pulled off a magical upset. The strategic genius of the game, the execution of the strategy in the game, it was all of it just revolved around that amazing strategy and stopping those set pieces. And we won. We won. Not a lot of people thought we were going to win. And we came in and we pulled off one of the biggest upsets in the entire soccer world that year, in the state of soccer in Louisiana that year. And I think it deserves mention as the greatest game for Vanderbilt in the 2018-2019 school year. And finally, for Athlete of the Year, that is the final award. A lot of people that deserve this, that I'll go into this as potential contenders. I'm going to talk about them in just a second. When I say Athlete of the Year, I don't mean one specific sport. You have to be consistently great at multiple sports. If it could be 3, it would be great. At least 2. I'm going to mention some honorable mentions for just one sport greatness, but the person who won, and deservedly so, was great in multiple sports. So a few honorable mentions, actually a lot of honorable mentions. Brennan Hamner in baseball. He's a very flashy, great pitcher. And when I say flashy, I mean like the stats just pop out to you. You know, all these strikeouts, all the few hits, these complete games, these shutouts. It's great. And Brennan, I think deservedly so, has had an amazing season, and he deserves all the praise that he's getting. Nick Marley, playing goalie for the boys soccer team, is, in my opinion, the biggest standout for the boys soccer team this year. Only one sport athlete, but he MVP of a lot of games, had a great game against St. Louis, had a great season, just phenomenal play from the goalie this year for the boys soccer team. Katie Haydell and Bryn Kelso, Katie Haydell specifically first. And Katie Haydell was, she played in soccer, great soccer player, and of course a great sprinter, was very successful in both. I think there were a lot of people like that, but I don't know exactly how many of those girls were that successful in both. So I'm going to talk about Katie specifically right here, playing both in soccer and doing the sprints, the 4x1. She was on the show. Great job. Congratulations to Katie. Dylan Smith, one of those people that led the cross-country team, the boys cross-country team, to a 7th place finish, a great finish, and stayed the only senior on that team and went in. Congratulations to him there. And then, of course, a great finish for him in all those sports in track, all those long-distance running sports in track. Congratulations to him, and he deserves an honorable mention. Bryn Kelso, an 8th grader, I think also was both in cross-country and track. I know she was at least in track running those long-distance runs and was great doing it. So congratulations to her. Rebecca Lawrence and Amy Parrott, both same vein of this. Girls track and girls basketball, 2 starters for the girls basketball team, consistent starters for the girls basketball team, and also very strong in track and field, specifically doing different jumping and jumping specifically events. So great for both of them. Kaylin Dehart as a freshman, talked about this in Liam Martin's interview a few weeks ago. Kaylin had a great season playing pitcher the entire season for the girls softball team. So I think she deserves a mention. And then lastly, Brennan Patterson, both having a very strong football season and a very strong track season running the sprints. He had a great year playing defensive back and playing the sort of hybrid position in football, and of course running the sprints in track. And lastly, the 2018-2019 Terrier Talk Award for the Best Athlete of the Year goes to Brittany Theriot. Yes, and I think deservedly so. She had a marvelous year in multiple sports. She had a good season in track. I didn't see her name very much, but I know she's talented at the very least, and she does compete in track. But more specifically, basketball and especially volleyball. Basketball, I think most people would say she's the best player on the team. She defines physicality on the court like really no other person does on the basketball court. She runs after the ball at any minute, at any point in time, and all-district player, amazing player for the basketball team. And then for girls, for volleyball specifically, she was the state MVP of the state championship tournament that she led her team to winning. You could make the argument that she is the single best volleyball player in the state, or at least in Division II. That is a very arguable case. She probably has the best argument using those statistics and that accolade. You can't say that in most other things. You had a couple of gold medals, one for the track team. Of course, congratulations to those people. I talked about that a couple of weeks ago, last week even. But that is, she led the team to a state championship victory, back-to-back state championship victories, but specifically this season, I think the most impressive resume as a multi-sport athlete this season goes to Brittany Terrier, and congratulations to her for winning the 2018-2019 Terrier Talk Award for Best Athlete of the Year. So that is going to wrap it up this week and this season for Terrier Talk. So we'll be back in the fall. Why is this a season finale, Ben? Well, because there isn't any Vanderbilt sport to talk about. I'm not going to thank you for the question. It's a very important question. But this is the only season, there's not anything else to talk about. There's no state championship. There's no sport runs in the summer because there's no school going on. So I will pick this back up for season 2 at the beginning of the school year in August, previewing those fall sports, football, cross country, swimming, and volleyball, of course, wanting to defend those state championships in cross country and volleyball, trying to have a good season in football as well as a good season in swimming. So we'll talk about that then. I don't know the exact date. It will be a Sunday night at 8 o'clock. I can't tell you that much. But I don't know the exact date for the football team, for the whole season, for all the fall sports. But it will be a Sunday in August. I can guarantee you that much. But that's not all. There will also be, I'm announcing a second show will be going live on this channel, on AA, going in around August as well. See, for me, my true passion, not that I enjoy all sports, I really do, but my biggest passion is football, specifically college football. So I'm going to be starting up a different sport, a different series in August this year, talking about specifically college football. I will have co-hosts. It will be equally run by, I'm planning to have all 4 of us. And it will probably be Wednesday nights. There'll be a lot more, many more details about that closer to that release date, which will be probably the week before college football starts. But get ready for that. And get ready for a great school year and a great season going into this next year, the 2019-2020 season. So I wish the best of luck to all of our athletes and, of course, all the people that are watching this show right now, watching the series. I thank everyone for a great season of Terrier Talk, Season 1, and I wish everyone the best of luck going into whatever we're doing next. Of course, finals for a lot of the students going in the next couple of weeks. And I hope everyone the best of luck, and I will see you next time, not next week, but it will be the same time, same channel, later on a few months from now in August. I will see you.